Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where my guest today is my good friend, Davey Hamilton, one of the greatest IndyCar drivers of all time, and a great restoration story. Davey, thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You grew up in Nampa, Idaho.
Yeah.
And how in the world do you ever get behind a wheel for the first time?
Well, you know, I'm a second generation. My father raced, and so as a kid, watching my father race and going to the race short tracks of Meridian Speedway in Idaho. You know, obviously, I got hooked. But as a kid, you're running around playing with all the other kids and not watching the racing so much. But as I got older, I thought that maybe it was something I wanted to do. But it was hard. It was really hard back then. The go-karts weren't as the go-karts of today. They were kind of just, you know, the backyard junkers that you put together, and there really wasn't any official like go-kart races at the time around Idaho. So it was much easier for me to get into motorcycles, and because you can go down to any motorcycle shop, buy a dirt bike, and go race them on the weekends, and so that's really what I thought I was going to do, was be a motocross racer. And so I started that at a young age, and I think I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade.
Oh my goodness!
So really young, and then all up until, you know, as a junior in high school, I thought that was the route. And I would do okay in Idaho, you know, good enough to win and be competitive. But when I had an opportunity to race with a guy named Bob Hanna, who was the Supercross champion at the time, I found out maybe I didn't have the natural talent that it took. So at that point is when I kind of switched gears and thought, well, maybe the race car deal wouldn't be a bad idea.
So did you pick up a go-kart?
You know, I never did. I went straight into a bigger car, what we called them at the time, was a beginner class at a racetrack there in Idaho. And it was a modified, so an open-wheel car with a 6-cylinder engine with a 1-barrel. So not a lot of power, and you made you learn how to drive them, and handling was a key opponent of it. And so, yeah, that's what we started in. It was just a little 6-cylinder, straight 6 car.
And when you race oval tracks?
Yeah, a pavement oval. Yeah.
And how fast do they go?
You know, at that time, they probably weren't very fast. It felt fast, you know, as a senior in high school is when I started, and they probably had top speed of maybe 100. Compared to what we run today, it probably wasn't too fast.
Then how did you end up in the Indy Light Series? Is there a step along the way?
Kind of behind the scenes, my dad, knowing the sport, knowing how difficult it is, knowing the dangers of it, knowing how hard it is to really be successful at it, he kind of drove me away from it, so to speak. And as far as, you know, he never brought it up, hey, you want to drive a race car? Do you want to get involved? But my mother knew I did. So she, behind the scenes, bought me my first car.
Really?
And so once I showed up at the house with that car, my dad goes, well, I guess, you know, you had the willpower to go get one. I guess I better make it right.
Oh, my goodness.
So he helped me make it a good race car, and he's been supportive ever since. But from that first year, I was very fortunate. I was a track record holder in that class. I was Rookie of the Year in that class. I also won the championship my rookie year, first time ever in a car. So
where are you traveling from?
And that was just local. That was just
local.
all in Boise, Idaho basin area, yeah. And so the next year, I had the opportunity to drive for a guy. He called, and he says he didn't want to drive anymore, and that was the next step up into sprint cars. And so I drove for him for a couple of years, and a lot of hard knocks. And at that point, we started traveling around the Northwest, going up into Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and some into Canada even. And I think there was a series called Canadian American Racing Association, and I was fortunate enough to be Rookie of the Year in that. Didn't finish great in the points, can't remember where we finished, but was Rookie of the Year. And just kind of slowly climbed that short track ladder, and that's what a lot of guys. And it was a much more difficult probably back then because there wasn't the opportunity with the cars that we have today, with the availability, a lot of building yourself kind of thing, and just one step at a time. And started getting phone calls to drive other people's cars from New York, California, and just at that point started traveling around and driving. And it was difficult because, you know, I worked for my father in the construction business, and I was on this painting crew, so I did a lot of he did big commercial apartment complexes, things like that. And so I was on the painting crew because that was the easiest to get off of, you know. They didn't miss me that much. So
Are you a good painter?
I was.
Awesome.
I was good, yeah. And so did that for years, and that's how I made my money to be able to go race. So at one point, I had to decide, you know, the racing was starting to get a little bit more busy, and so I took that plunge of, you know, taking faith and all in and going racing, and it was challenging. It was a lot of sleeping in my pickup and on buddies' floors, or eating a lot of Taco Bell, and it was a challenge, but it was well worth it.
I want to ask a couple things about that time of your life. What kind of racing did your dad do?
So he was always into sprint car racing.
Okay.
That was kind of his background. Out on the West Coast, he's kind of the guy. His name's well known. He's won a lot of races. He has a car that he drove for years and years called the Pink Lady. Still a really famous car, and all painted pink. And the guy that originally owned it had a Chinese restaurant. He was a Chinese guy, and he called it the Pink Lady. And it was really won a lot of races in that car. So famous. Cool. He still has it currently. He still has that car. It's all restored, beautiful car.
Oh, awesome.
And so between his winning and having that car, it would just stand out over all the other ones. And you know, I would have to say honestly that car was built in 1967 by Grant King here at Indianapolis. It probably has more wins than any sprint car ever.
Wow.
Because it's still alive, it's still going, it's still fast, it still could be raced today. So
wow.
pretty amazing car.
Did you ever experience an accident during that time?
No, I was fortunate. You had some accidents, but nothing major. Nothing to get hurt. You just hop out and, you know, a little bit of damage here and to go to fix it. But you're always that guy. It's not going to happen to you. But I seen the results of some bad accidents in our racing against guys. Some guys getting killed, some friends getting killed actually, and you know, it was, you know, you had to dig deep and really talk to yourself on, you know, how dangerous the sport really is. And when I started in the 80s, you know, safety wasn't nearly what it is today. And, you know, I look at some of those cars and the gear that we were wearing, it's like, wow, you wouldn't even get in a car today if you knew. Yeah. We
had a mutual friend, and Scott Brayton, and you're actually the Scott Brayton Goodwill Award winner at Indy.
Yeah.
And he and I would talk about every other day, and because he lived in Coldwater, and we'd get together a lot. We talked a lot about the risk. I don't think people understand the athleticism unless they're around the sport that you guys have. I think your heartbeat is so fast in a race car, and so you got to train to have your heartbeat that fast outside of the race car.
Yeah. Training is so key. I mean, it's something that I learned early on. You know, when I had my first real opportunity, and you know, super modifieds is where I was really able to make my name. They were the super fast, the next fastest car to an Indy car, the fastest short track cars there were. So when I had the opportunity to drive for one of the top guys, the Penske's of super modified racing, I went to the first race and I got in the lead, and my neck started getting tired, and we didn't have headrests and things back in those days. And you know, when you're going around oval and your head's leaning to the right, and pretty soon your vision is faulted and your depth perception is messed up, and who passed me but my own father, right? To win the race, right? So I knew that you had to be physically fit, and I think I finished third. I think it was my dad, Billy Vukovic, and myself ended up third, knowing that I could have won that race if if I was in better shape. And so from that point on, it was gym time and trainers, and it's something that even today, I mean more so today even, that you know, every driver out there is a true athlete, and to be able to sustain G-forces and the speed and the things that we do, you have to be in good shape. It's not just sitting there, let me tell you. The things that we do in that cockpit, first of all, is, like I say, just to sustain 4 G-forces. It's not that easy, you know, 4 times your body weight. And then those, you know, like an IndyCar has no power steering, a lot of downforce, so you know you have to tug on the wheel, you're shifting gears. Meanwhile, you're trying to tell your crew what the car is actually doing so they can make changes on it, along with 32 other guys on the racetrack with you that you're trying to pass. And then some of the hardest things you'd think is on the racetrack doing that, but some of the hardest is making pit stops, making sure that you get down to the speed limit, get into your box without, you know, making a mistake, and getting back up to speed quickly. And at 200 miles an hour, it's a football field a second. So, you know, just at those speeds, you miss 1 second and a guy just beat you by a football field. And that's very, very difficult to make up. So, you know, being physically fit helps you be mentally fit as well. Yeah. And I always had that. I felt that I was in great shape when I was racing full time, and racing 70, 80 times a year. So it always made my mind that I was the best guy out there. I felt like I was the most fit. Not that the other guys weren't, but in my own mind, I felt like I'm not going to get tired. I'm going to put 100% in, and I can go the whole race no matter how long it is. So a really key component for sure.
Do you have any church background whatsoever? Or
Yeah, well,
at
actually,
that time?
when I was at that time, no. When I was young, yes, but because we raced locally and we raced Saturday night, Sunday was church time. But then once I started on the road, we raced a lot of times on Sundays. You know, the races were a lot of the big ones were Sunday afternoon races. Still today, I mean, we raced on Sundays, and back then, you know, prayer was on your own. You know, your prayer was doing your own prayer before you get in the car, and today it's so much different because we've brought prayer to the track. You know, and so it's so much easier. So you go to church at the track, and so back then we just didn't have that. And now it's even short track racing. No matter where you are, whether it's a Saturday night, you know, sometimes you may be, you know, 100 miles from home and you're spending the night and you're not home for Sunday, or you may be a flight away, or who knows. So it's always nice to have that, you know, bring the prayer to the races.
Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yeah, it's in every level of it, I think.
And you've been a big part of that, and we're going to get to that. So you're doing really well. You're Rookie of the Year in that series. What happens next?
So that's when, you know, the better guys are called me. The guys that had really good equipment and were serious racers, and they had, you know, you look at the background of a team, and it's pretty easy to know how good they are. You just look in the paper where the results are, because no matter what driver, usually the cream rises to the top. And so now I'm getting rides, you know, the Chuck Gurneys and the Vukoviches and some of the great guys, Jimmy Seals. They were driving for these guys, and now I'm getting the call to drive for these guys. So knowing
how old are you?
So I was in my early 20s, 21, 22 when that started happening. I started to be able to get with some really good stuff, but it was still challenging because back then, NASCAR, IndyCar, they weren't looking at the young guys. They looked at the experienced guys. You know, that was more, you know, you need a lot of experience to get in this IndyCar, this NASCAR deal. So they really weren't looking at guys until they were in their late 20s or early 30s, because feeling that they needed that experience. Wow, how's that ever changed, right? They're getting these 17, 18-year-old kids now, right? But back then, that's what I was up against. And I remember going to an IndyCar race in Portland, because we raced the night before in super modifieds. So going to the IndyCar race, I met AJ, told him I wanted to drive for him, and he says, you know, he looked at me and said, man, you need to get some experience, right? You know, like, but I was older than I look. I've always looked fairly young, which wasn't healthy at that point, because you wanted to look, you know, older and mature, you know, but that's what I ran into. It was just, and so I just kept racing and win a lot of races. Fortunately, I would never change it, because those guys really were my foundation. You know, I've had so many great owners over the years, and they were the foundation of me, giving me the opportunity to, you know, to leap into the IndyCar. And without those short track owners and the faith that they had in me and winning those races, you know, that's where it all came. It wasn't a check. I didn't bring a check to get in a race car. I brought wins, you know, and some on-track performances.
I think that's awesome. There's a concept that I think the Bible teaches. It's be, do, go. It's who you are designed to be determines what you're designed to do, which determines where you're designed to go. In essence, you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm a race car driver, I'll go race at Indy. It has to flow out of who you are and what you've been doing, and then the ripple effect of where you go comes out of that, and
you
your
know,
experience.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, God gives us our talents, right? But we still have to make the best of them.
Yes.
You know, just because He gives you that talent, if you're just going to sit on the couch, it's probably not going to happen, right? So He gives us the talent, and then but you still have to pull out the desire and the focus and the drive to fight for it. And so, you know, I was fortunate they gave me talent, and that gave me a comfort zone in race cars. And there's a lot of things I tried that I didn't have the talent for, but man, the racing's really, it's what I do. You know, I just love it. Out of high school, I did move to California for a short period of time to learn how to build race cars. So a car builder down in Fresno, Dave Masterman, hired me. I knew nothing about fabrication, but I wanted to learn how the cars really worked. And he had a lot of patience, I'll tell you, because he taught me how to bend tubing, how to weld, how to machine, how to use lathes, you know, just really to build the car from the ground up. And it gave me, you know, appreciation for what really goes into them, but it also gave me the knowledge of what makes them go fast and why we design a car the way we design them and what things do to make them better. And I think that really helped me through my career a lot, because after that I started building some of my own cars. But it was through his, you know, his hiring of me, of a young kid, and like I say, I lived at his house, and you know, it was quite an experience. But so at that point, you know, I wanted to race, and it was in California, and we were building this beautiful race car for these guys. I mean, it was like the latest tech stuff. I mean, all brand new, beautiful, and they said, well, they've changed everything but the car, and they're doing that right now. And the next thing they're going to change if it doesn't work is the driver. And I'm thinking, well, I hope that driver doesn't cut it, because I want to be the guy in the door. And so, fortunately, that driver they had, the results weren't there. So they decided to make a driver change, and I'm thinking, this is my opportunity to get in this car.
Yeah.
So they call me at the race shop. They go, hey, you know, Dave Masterman, the guy I work for, answered the phone. He said, hey, phone's for you. It's the guys, you know, in the car. I go, oh, perfect, you know, because I knew that they were looking. So they called me to get my dad's phone number. So that was another reality check, right? So my dad got that ride and went on to win the USAC championships and win all these races with it. I knew it was a great program. So, but at that point, you know, a few years later is when I had my opportunity with a good team, and so we did race together a lot, and it was a lot of fun. And I found out that now, having a son racing, that when I race with him, against him, I find myself watching him. If I'm behind him, I watch him more than I race, which is not healthy.
Oh.
So I'm sure my dad did the same thing with me.
Oh,
you know, if he's in front, it's like he's focused and he doesn't see, so he's going, he's doing his job. But when you're in front of him, and so I see that today. Honestly, that, you know, you kind of keep an eye, what's he doing, where's he at, and so I'm sure my father did the same thing.
Well, wasn't Al Unser Sr.'s fourth win, did that include Al Jr. not blocking?
Yeah,
a
right,
little
not
bit?
blocking. Yeah, well, you know what? It's a natural thing.
Yeah.
You can't take it. I mean, when you have, you know, your fathers, your sons, your uncles, or whatever involved, somebody that you're related to involved in the sport, or somebody you just really love, it's hard not to have that tight connection and want to help them. What
was it like in your relationship with your dad off the track when you're competing against each other at such a high level?
Yeah, you know, it was actually good. I mean, he wanted success for me, for sure, but he was still racing himself. He still had races to win, had a lot he wanted to do. He actually came to Indianapolis in 1981 out of his own pocket. He wasn't a big team, just wanted to try it, put a program together, and raced a few IndyCar races for a few other guys after that, but just very few. Never made it in the racing as an occupation. He always had his business, and he did it as a hobby. But he got a taste of some IndyCar racing and some you know, some big league racing for sure, but that wasn't what he did for money. Pretty smart, because I chose the other route, you know, and the racing's all that's what I do, you know, and was no looking back, no regrets by any stretch, but it's a challenging business for sure.
Oh, it is. In your story, you're in your younger 20s. How do you get noticed by Dick Simon?
So Dick Simon was, he raced with my father. He's from Utah originally, and so we were neighbors and raced a lot with my father. And so they were always good friends, and he kept track. He came up through the short track industry as well. So Dick was, you know, he always knew of me, kept an eye out on the short track guys. You know, that guy was a fighter too. You know what I mean? He fought for what he had and became very successful, and was able to fulfill his dreams driving race cars. And you know, he was quite a guy. I mean, I obviously watched him because I knew him. You know, there are very few of the guys I actually met in person, but he was one of the guys I did as a young kid.
And did he offer your first ride?
So we talked about it. We talked about him, you know, me going to work for Dick. But when it all happened was, surprisingly, Chip Ganassi gave me my first opportunity in IndyCar racing. And Chip, at that time, Michael was leaving to go Formula One racing.
Michael Andretti.
Oh yeah, and Bill Simpson was a good friend of Chip's, and Simpson's telling Chip, hey, you got to put this kid in and give him a try. And so I talked to Chip, and he said, yeah, it sounds like, let's try it. And unfortunately, at that time, it was back to a situation to where he still had Target as a sponsor. And Target at that point, they said, you know, we'd rather have a veteran guy. You know, this rookie deal, which is changed, like I say. Today, they don't mind having the rookies, but they wanted a veteran. And Chip, he didn't commit, say, hey, you're going to do it for sure, but he felt obligated somewhat to help me, so he gave me an IndyCar. And And then Ron Himmelgarn, he's the one that put the program together. So Chip gave me the car, and Himmelgarn ran it, and that was my first introduction to Indy.
And where'd you go?
So that was a fun year. We were fast, which was encouraging. It was very, very fast. And that first year, we had a wheel break. I felt like, how can this be? There was a wheel made in Canada that I'm going down the straightaway and the wheel breaks, the car spins, I hit the wall, fractures my ankle, and but didn't really put me out. They put a pin in it and off you go. But now I got this wreck car, and it's going, why me? You know, what the heck happened there? Why me? Well, they shut the track down for the day, and they did research on those wheels, and they outlawed them after that. They were proved to be a faulty wheel, but unfortunately, I was the one that had it break first.
What track was that?
That was at Indy. That was at the 500. My first time in IndyCar was at Indy in 1995. And so, yeah, so that was quite an eye-opener to come to that track first.
Back then, you were there the whole month.
Yeah, whole month, yeah.
What was that like?
Wow, long, but I knew I needed all the track time I could get. And, I had great teachers. Lee Koonsman was a part of Himmelgarn's team, and he was, he helped me out a lot. He was a great racer. He came from the same background I did from sprint cars. And, I just had a lot of help from the Vukovic family, from Foyt's to, a lot of guys kind of that I met. They made me comfortable, honestly. And Ron Himmelgarn did a good job on bringing me up to speed slowly. And when it came time to go, I got back. What happened, that car got wrecked. And Chip had a partner at that time named Jim Hayhoe. And Jim came up and he goes, "Hey, I know that car's no good." He goes, "But you're doing a great job. I got another one."
And yet you had not qualified yet?
I had not qualified. That was the first week of practice. Yeah.
My.
And so Jim Hayhoe gave me another car. Himmelgarn, they get it all ready. We go, and I show up just in time for the last day of qualifying. We go out, and I'll never forget. It was 1995. Emerson Fittipaldi was on the bubble with Roger Penske at 225 miles an hour.
I remember that.
Exactly 225. My first lap was a 226.5. My second lap was like a 226.4. I'm thinking, man, I'm way in the show. And then on the last lap, coming in turn 2, the car just picked up this horrendous push. I almost hit the wall, had to downshift, and I was a really slow lap, and it dropped my average down to where it was below 225. And I came in, and that was the first year for Firestone as well, and that's what we had on the car. And they said, well, maybe it was the tire. Let's put another set of tires on and go again. So we got there again, and the car just wouldn't turn, and I missed the race. And ended up being, we didn't find out till later that afternoon that that tub actually had broken.
That's where you sit. That's how they identify race cars?
That's how they identify. And basically what happened is where the engine bolts to the tub, the bolts, and it was a road race car that Mr. Hale gave me, and it was curbed a lot, and it just made it weak right there. And we went to the high-speed downforce, it just popped the bottom of the
So that's what happened when your speed dropped?
Yeah. And then we go out with it broken again, not knowing what it really was until we found it later. But it was quite an experience, And unfortunately, my teammate that year was Stan Fox. And Stan got in that horrific accident on the first lap of the 500 with Cheever and those guys. So it was quite a humbling year because here, so much excitement. I'm there. I'm at the 500. It's where I wanted to be. I'm in an Indy car. I'm running fast. And then I have a wheel break. And then so you're down in the dumps and, your emotions are taking over big time. Will you ever have a chance again? And then next thing, a guy comes in, gives you another car, and you're back on top of the world, and you're out there going fast again, and then the car breaks, and you don't make the race, and now you're going, wow, is the opportunity ever going to, it was such a roller coaster. And then Stan, my teammate who helped me out a lot, and gets in that terrible accident and, had to fight for his life, really, for a long time. And man, that drive back to Idaho at that time was pretty interesting because back then I couldn't afford a plane ticket, so it was definitely a drive. And not knowing if you really had the opportunity again.
Yeah, the brass ring came, and you're not sure if you're ever going to be able to do it again, but thankfully you were going to be able to do it again. What's it like to get behind the wheel when you go down the straightaway at Indy? Had you ever gone? You're about 250 down the straightaway.
So we were at my fastest was like 247 at that time.
On the straightaway.
In the straightaway, yeah.
And what's that like? Had you ever gone that fast before?
No.
In any? I wouldn't think in any other situation. What's that like?
It's funny.
How's it different?
The first time, because I'm used to 900 horsepower, sprint cars, super modifieds, power all at once. There's no shifting gears. It's just you have it right now. And so when I pulled out of the pits in the Indy car the first time, I like gas it. I'm thinking, man, this thing's kind of a slug. there's a lot of power. It didn't seem like a lot of power. And I'm going through the gears, and pretty soon as I'm going through the gears, that speed was coming. I go, wow, this thing is fast. I mean, I'm glad it didn't have all that power because I was going plenty fast, and it takes you a while to get really used to that kind of speed. And in '96, when I ran my fastest lap, was with AJ. And it was a 232-mile-an-hour lap.
That's the following year?
Yeah, it was the following year.
Well, I think people need to realize, I think Scott Brayton set the record. He still has the highest pole position record. It's like 236 or 230.
Yeah, it's up there. Line Dyke broke the one-lap record.
He was like 237 or something. So you're going about as fast as anybody's ever gone in an Indy car
that
in
was
96.
the year. That was the year that all the records were broken. And that next, so after 95, I didn't race IndyCar again. And then the start of 96 is when the Indy Racing League became, and AJ Foyt decided to go that route. And he gave
Carton and Tony George separate.
They separated, and teams, good teams went both ways, bad teams went both ways. So it totally split it up. But AJ decided to go with the IndyCar series, and it was more of an oval series. That's my background, and so he gave me a call. I mean, talk about a crazy call you never expect, and it's from AJ Foyt.
Do you remember the call?
Oh, do I ever remember it?
How'd it go?
It was I was in New Orleans actually. At a trade show, thinking I wanted to do a go-kart track somewhere and try to make a real business because racing was getting difficult. And I thought, well, maybe if I do a go-kart track and that generates some funding. And so I'm in this huge trade show, and back then cell phones were in a bag, and so there was no caller IDs on them.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so I answered the phone, and he said, "This is AJ. It says Davey. Yeah, this is AJ Foyt." I go, yeah, right. Which buddy of mine, is trying to trick me right now, and. I go, hey, which it was very loud, and I go, hey, can I get your number? I'll call you right back. I can't hear in this building. It wasn't good service. And so I got the number, and I went straight over to the phone booth. Back then, they still had phone booths, and I opened it up and seen that it was from Houston. The area code was from a 713 area code.
Where he lived.
Wow. So I straight to my hotel, got quiet, man, nervous, and that conversation was unbelievable. He just said, hey, what's your plans for next year? And I go, I really don't have any. Just want to go IndyCar racing if I can. He goes, well, I'm interested, and you want to talk about it? And I go, yeah. Do you tell me when and where? And I go, is this just for the 500? Just to run Indy? And he goes, no, for the whole season. Oh. And I said, man, I'll be to Houston tomorrow. And that's basically how it worked. And he hired me. It was just that.
That's incredible.
Simple, yeah.
Four-time winner in Indy, winningest driver ever.
He asked me, he goes, you have an agent? I go, no, just me. He goes, perfect, you're hired. I
could just hear him saying it. I knew a neighbor of his, so I've encountered AJ a few times, and I don't know him like you do, but he's one of a kind.
One of a kind.
He really is. So you get the ride. Is this 96?
Yeah.
And what's your first race with AJ?
First race was Orlando.
I think I was there.
Orlando. First time in Orlando. Very first IRL race was at Orlando. I think that year we ended up like 6th maybe in the championship.